uh, now on to Phil Rose. This is the one picture that I have of Phil and I. This was my very first true cross-country soaring adventure, and it was with Phil in a DG 1000 2 Mays ago at the Seattle Glider Council, afraid of dust up. And now I'm going to let Phil take over and discuss whatever he wants, really, his career, his ideas, his world record-breaking flights that he recently had. I'm going to hand this over to you, Phil. Thank you for being here.
Hey, Mark, thanks for the invite. I don't know if people can hear me very well. I'm using this little AirPod. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Sweet. Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that DG 1000 too, because that was a that ship, because I'm looking at it, you shared your screen with me, at least as far as I know. That ship was as Tony Whitaker's ship. And Tony Whitaker, certainly a benefactor to soaring here in the Northwest. I don't know if any folks have flown with him or not, but he has a big hangar over in Ephrata, and he has a really sweet twin Grove over in Arlington, and a bunch of other airplanes and gliders that he deals with, and outstanding pilot and great asset to have in the soaring community. So we want to thank him for letting us take that two-seater out and go fly around. It's always neat when someone else is putting you on their insurance, and you're like, really? Okay, well, I'll go fly it if you got me on the insurance. It seems like, like I was telling you, rather than a bunch of stuff about me or plaques on the wall or anything. Of course, it's always exciting doing challenging things, but it looks like you got some youth members too, and you've got some other guys that you said that they started back in '72, and then they had a long hiatus, and then you got the guys, Corey is an engineer. It started flying at 45, and then you've got guys in the teenage years like Rick, and then they have two 15-year layoffs. So I had a 15-year layoff as well, and most of the flying careers are kind of go in fits and starts, and I'll just try to run through a couple of things I see on some of the careers. Obviously, it's really difficult to go from soloing a glider and carry that career straight through to becoming Neil Armstrong. It's a pretty meteoric rise when he's out there flying the X-15 as a glider. But it can be some simple goals for the clubs that want to just learn to fly solo, or maybe they want to get their own ship someday, or become an instructor, tow pilot, or eventually a professional pilot, and then go back and fly gliders like I do, because I'm a professional pilot for Delta. And it's kind of fun having some time off and then going out and slipping the surly bonds with the Hawks and the Eagles, and soaring and gliding. It's a lot of fun. I think the starting of the teenage years, it's pretty beneficial because you're building those flying skills when you're young, and it's before you leave home, and then you've left home for work or college or kids, and then you may not come back to soaring for many years thereafter. So what I see on that is that I got my wife in here. She's got some honey-do items for me. Anyway, so people will do some soaring, and then they'll come back to it after a couple of years. And you hope that they can keep coming back, and you hope that there's tow planes and clubs for them to come back to, which is, I'm really excited about your club and how you're pressing it forward and getting more participation. And then, another great thing about flying with glider pilots, and especially becoming a solo pilot or getting your private pilot license, and then going cross country or doing acro or whatever the case may be, it's a great confidence builder, and not just for flying, but it's also about life in general. And usually when I'm sitting around the campfire, or at the end of the day of soaring, we're putting the gliders away, some people tell some stories, reading dinner, whatever. I learn a lot more about life in general from these old guys, or even not so old guys. I learn something from everyone I fly with, to tell you the truth. But I learn about life, and not just flying and soaring in particular. And then the club environment's great because you get that socializing and you get the learning together, and it's stuff that's done in real life, not necessarily online, virtual, like some of the things we've been forced into with COVID. But the in real life things, it turns in between getting the clubs out together and socializing, and then you kind of have two different members in the club too. And this is kind of, broad brush, but you have some that are the extroverts and you have some that are the introverts, and everyone can, have fun and play a role in a club, regardless of your level of I'm just dying to go out and party with people, or maybe the introverts are great at focusing on a project and getting it done and doing it with few distractions. So I want to blend all those people together. And then every soaring club, and this is kind of what I've seen some folks suffering from the Northwest here, is that I want glider pilots to avoid the lone eagle concept. And I know that, Neil Armstrong with Eagle has landed, and his glider down there was Eagle 2 or whatever. And I actually flew with some of the guys in the club in Orlando that used to fly with Neil Armstrong. And it's kind of interesting. They're old guys, though. Don't get me wrong, they're old guys. But they have mentors and mentees. So if there's a way that kind of like me and Mark went out there on that day, I played the role as a mentor, and I did the things that took the load off of him so that he could just learn about the aspects of soaring cross country that day. And I think that was an important thing to kind of just narrow the focus and see what we already know. He knows how to fly, et cetera. Just let's think about these cross country concepts. And then, kind of stepping back from the theory of the rugged pioneer in the West and the rugged individualism, because I tell you, I went in Ely, Nevada, and I thought I had my own little self-launching glider, and had a nice little program, but it took a really big team to go out and do some of those long flights out in Ely, Nevada, in the middle of nowhere. So I'll just kind of stop there, and that's kind of my philosophy. I want to get clubs going, and if people want to ask me about some things that I think you can get clubs going, or if there's someone that's younger and wants to ask me some questions about how I got started flying gliders, because it wasn't a very meteoric rise either. It was just kind of I learned how to fly and then started taking some steps from there. So anyone wants to ask a question, I think I've blabbed on long enough. Maybe I'm not. Okay.
So tell us about flying out of Ely.
Yeah, it was it's kind of a bare bones operation, because Keith Essex brought his tow plane in from Minden, and he was very gracious and hired a great tow pilot, and got him lodging and paid for everything. And then we had 3 great weeks of flying, and we had a lot of highs, a couple lows that were kind of devastating, especially with one accident. But all in all, it's a great place to fly. You need to have a long wing ship, though, if you're going to be more comfortable out there. Long wing ship.
Phil, tell us about your experience at the the U.S. Soaring, the U.S. Air Force Soaring program, or glider program.
That's at the Air Force Academy. A lot of up and coming Air Force pilots get exposed to it, and then pretty much everyone at the Academy goes through a soaring program, and they're going to be given the opportunity to solo. And the solo happens pretty quick. It's within about 10 rides, 15 at the absolute maximum, and they are flying solo. But they're not going to do much beyond that unless they go to an instructor upgrade. I got lucky and got to participate in the program, and then they tell you in public speaking things that you want to tell them what you're going to tell people, and then give them 3 main points, and then tell them what you told them. So if I had anything to say on that, it would be like, go buy your own glider, go buy your own glider, and then don't forget to buy your own glider.
Ian, Jonathan, you got any questions, or youth members that are on the call right now? You got any questions you want to ask Phil?
Yeah. Oh, I was just going to ask you a question. How did you get started in soaring?
I was 18, and at the Air Force Academy, I did my solo, and then I upgraded to instructor. they had a program where you just go straight from being a solo student to an instructor, which is kind of a fast program. But and then I bought my own glider when I was 21, and it was a LaBelle, and I had a little partnership with a friend of mine, and we took it, and since we already had kind of the basics covered as far as learning how to fly in a 233 or an ASK 21, and we got our the foundation set in that. Then started branching out and flying a little farther away from the airfield, and this was pre-GPS and pre-navigation displays. It was some rings on a chart and your glide ratio, maybe cut that in half for some sync on the way back. And then one thing that was really good was flying with other glider pilots. So watching where they went and seeing that they had a 40-to-1 ship and I had a 40-to-1 ship, and that I should be able to do something similar to them. And then next thing I know, I'm kind of following them way back in the mountains of Colorado, and getting high and staying high and squeaking back home. And that's kind of how I learned how to fly cross country, which is basically just getting a good ship and getting high and staying high and being in good conditions.
And what planes then were you flying for the Air Force?
I kind of got lucky. I wanted to be an engineer, but I wasn't going to be a great engineer. I think I was going to pass all my classes in aero engineering, but so I focused on being a pilot, which just was it wasn't as difficult as being an engineer. And then I got lucky and got to go fly in the Air Force, the T-37, T-38 for basic training, and then I got to fly the F-15, and then the F-16, and then eventually retired flying the F-22. So I kind of got to go fly some fun aircraft during the career.
And when you said you took 15, or you had a 15-year hiatus, what did you do during that 15-year hiatus?
Oh yeah, I worked and I worked and I worked. I got a job flying for the airlines, and I had 3 kids to raise, so that was pretty much with the wife that put the kibosh. And also not being in a good soaring location. So if you're in Alaska or you're overseas, except I was in Germany at one point in time, and I didn't take a hiatus in Germany. I was actually a German glider instructor and a tow pilot over there at a club in Germany. And the clubs in Germany, that's, I mean, it's difficult to come up with the financing for some of these clubs. But for instance, one of the clubs I was in was for Bayer, which is, the aspirin manufacturing conglomerate. And they had 30 gliders and there were only 20 club members. So that was kind of like going into a candy store every day in the hangar, and you're able to fly any of them with a small checkout. They had everything from COS 6 up to a Nimbus 3DM. So it was a fantastic club to be in.
So if there's a couple of our club members have kicked the idea around of trying to take our club, Hood River Soaring, out to Ephrata for the week, and just start doing kind of like kind of an extended mentor-mentee week of the dust up. What do you think about that idea? And what would we need to pull it off?
Well, your fundraising efforts and your ASK 21, that right there, and a tow plane, you've got all the hardware bases covered right there. I mean, that's fantastic. I think that you could probably get some synergy with towing operations, or finding another 2-seater in the region, like the one that the SGC has with the Soaring Foundation, the DG1000. That would be great to get those guys off the ground for, especially the week after dust up. Is something you can plan on. Everyone's already over there anyway. That'd be nice. Mark's taking a lot of notes. It makes me nervous.
No, just ideas.
When the instructor's taking notes, he's like, okay, turned wrong direction in first thermal, didn't lower the landing gear.
Hey, Phil, it's Ron Monte. Go back to your comment about buying your own glider. Why are you advocating that thought?
Well, the first thing hopefully in the first part of the conversation, you heard me talking about socializing and learning. And that's why I think the glider clubs are just a fantastic idea. And I love them for that aspect. I don't know if we are able to get to the point where my dream club, and even in fact, my dream club didn't exist in Germany, and that's why I also needed to buy my own glider. But you know, part of the own glider thing is, I would say, is that if you're going to feel comfortable about flying gliders, you need to address some of the areas that create fear in the individual pilot, whether it's damaging a club ship, whether it's off landing, whether it's not having enough money to pay for a damage, or whatever the case may be, or actually just being able to take it and not have someone looking over your shoulder every single second. Because part of the, you know, the learning process is you've got to go out and you have to learn and make your own mistakes. But one thing that I thought was very beneficial about getting my own glider in the very beginning is that the guy who owned it, he took me and my partner out, and we actually had to practice off-field landings. And he wanted to do that before he even signed us. He was a CFIG as well, and he wanted to do that before we even got signed off on the insurance, before he let it go. So we've got this glider, and we could go to any CFI and probably get you know, ground check out and satisfy the insurance requirements. But we kind of hit it off with this old guy. He's like, okay, we're going to go to this guy's field and you're going to go land in it. So you're like taking off, and you're in a LaBelle for, I mean, this is like the third flight. So, and you're going to go practice land in this guy's field. And it had some obstacles, you know, it had trees, and it had power lines on one side, and it had a little fence row. So, I mean, there's something you have to consider the whole shebang going into the field. It wasn't a big, wide open field either. It was constricted, but it was, you know, hard dirt. It wasn't anything difficult to dig out of. And he was there and on the radio and said, okay, this is it, you're doing it. And we practiced, we put the landing gear down, told him on the radio what we're doing. We came in, we landed in the field. And now, after having flown a glider for, I guess I'd flown one for 3.5 years before I got my LaBelle. And then I was forced by this instructor to go to a practice off-field landing. And now the off-field landing is not that big of a deal. It's just, you know what to look for. You can go walk these things on your own. And now you've got your own ship. And gliders are made to actually land in the dirt. And if you've got your own and you can land your own in the dirt, and you don't have anyone else to answer to, then that kind of removes one of the reasons for not learning how to fly cross country, or just enjoying your glider to the maximum extent possible. So that's one reason I think for flying a glider. But the most important thing, I think, is getting some mentor flights from someone who knows what they're doing. And it could be in two-ship acro, or it could be in cross country, or it could be spot landing techniques, ridge soaring, whatever the case may be. If you get a glider that has a greater than 40-to-1 glide ratio, I'm talking about some type of a glass ship here. By the way, I did troll through Wings and Wheels. I saw a $27,000 Discus for sale, a $33,000 DG300 for sale, and a $40,000 Ventus for sale. And those kind of start to get in the reasonable price range. And I think that the price of those gliders is even going to come down some from here. So if I get a good glass ship, I can stretch my legs out away from the field without running into a ton of sink necessarily, and worrying if I'm going to make it home. And then I can also do some lead and follow flights with a mentor. And that's where we've done a dust up, and it's been pretty successful. I've actually had one guy in the DG1000 with me and two other gliders, and we went and did a 250K cross country together. And it was pretty successful. I mean, good conditions, but the other guys they weren't quite ready to go out on their own. And after this flight, sometimes things just click. So I think having your own glider really helps make things click, and it gets you into the sport with a level that you're committed, because you've already gone through the inspections and you've made this ship your own, or you've got a partner and you've got commitments. and you want to get this thing going. And having your own glider makes tow pilot operations essential. And you start to see the pipeline that you need to have tow pilots if you have a glider, and you want to do things to keep that tow pilot thing going. And next thing you know, you have a lot of people interested in maintaining this club, because it's not just getting initial instruction, it's how can I keep my glider airborne? Well, I need a tow plane and I need a crew.
Great, good answers. I appreciate that.
Phil,
So you had a self-launch glider,
Yeah.
but you've gone back to the old-fashioned way of doing it?
Well, when I get in the DG 1000, and I was kind of lucky. I was able to give 19 mentor flights last year in 2019, and each one of those flights is it's fun for me as an instructor. And by the way, I am not a CFIG at this time. I used to have a CFIG. I think I've had it 3 times, and I had to get it reinstated each time. So I wasn't able to maintain very good currency with it. But teaching in the back of the DG 1000, giving the guys the cross country mentor flight at dust up or other times during the summer out of TWISP or out of METAL involved just basically taking the guy up. We'll get away from the field and we fly across country for an hour or so, and then we turn around and come back. So it's about a 2.5 hour flight, and we're well outside gliding range by the time we get to the other end of the course. So it's something, and it's up to the student to get back, and I'll do the glove save if I need to keep us from landing out. And I've come closer than I wanted to a couple of times, but we generally get back to the field, and there's a lot of good learning going on in the DG 1000. So that's been probably the most enjoyable. It was more enjoyable to do the mentor flights going up with Mark than it was to go out and try to break a world record, because that was just that was long and arduous, and it was all by myself. But flying with other people, I got a lot out of that. So the 2-seater is good, but if I had two silents together, 2 silent electros, and we're flying together, man, that would be a great combination too. You got the self-launch capability. You've got the ability to get home if you miscalculate or have some trouble. That'd be a great combination. But the one I have right now is the Minilac FES, and that's the 13.5 meter version. That's the one I set all the. Well, I didn't set them just yet. I broke, and I have a preliminary claim on several records. We'll see how many of them come through. I'm fairly confident that there was one flight I did where I broke 3 world records on one flight, and I think that one is in the process of getting selected. And I think they've approved the national record on that. So you have to have a national record approved at the US level or whatever your home country is before you can have it sent off to FAI for a world record or continental.
But so in terms of a everyday use, you're in favor of, you like the self-launch approach?
I can't really say that, because every day, if I can get a tow, I don't know if I'm just trying to keep the tow pilots union employed, or I'm worried that if I don't use the tow plane pilot, or part of my problem too in the Minilac FES is I have an energy density problem with my batteries, and I would rather have I can get about 45 minutes of flight time out of the ship if I have full batteries. If I do my own launch, I'm probably going to get about 30 minutes. And where I was flying in the middle of nowhere in Ely, Nevada, sometimes I needed to have that available. There's some serious outlanding possibilities in Ely. Matter of fact, I got my first outlanding in the Minilac in the middle of nowhere in Nevada, and it was a little over a 6-hour retrieve, and I landed about 10 minutes prior to dark. So it was an interesting retrieve.
So Phil, as a 40-some-year-old beginner, you struck a chord with me. Your landing out instruction. I've now had a outlanding in a glider once with it was a commercial ride. I made a terrible mistake a few months into my commercial ride experience. No injuries, no no damage. And so I got super lucky in a wheat field there landing out, but it was just inconvenient. And then more recently, about a month ago, I had a dead stick on a Cessna 182. And so that's really the gist of the question for you, is how your glider experience has changed or influenced or maybe not at all your powered flight experience, because you've flown some pretty impressive aircraft. I got lucky in both cases, no injuries, no damage. It was icy, carb ice in the 182. But for me, the glider skills for sure played a role in getting me down safely. And the more famous example of Captain Sully is world renowned. I wonder if you've had any similar experiences, or just can speak to how the glider skills impacted your powered flight experiences.
Well, the gliders, obviously it's pure flight. You gotta love that. And there actually may be some people who are even not getting quite what they could out of a glider by learning how the gliders feel and max performing the gliders either through aerobatics or cross country or thermaling with other gliders, things like that. They may not be getting as much out of the pure glider flying experience as they could. But learning where you are on the L over D curve and knowing where you are in relation to a stall and these other time and energy management that you're doing with a glider, which is great. You have this constant clock going in the background of how much time I really have here and what are the key things I have to do. For a rope break at low altitude, or you've lost the engine in a 182. A friend of mine's a glider pilot. He was a CFIG at age 18, which I thought was pretty cool. And he was flying a pit special in Colorado, and he had an engine failure because his propeller separated the aircraft. And it was a S2, so he had a passenger as well. And nothing but oil and everything came back onto the windscreen. You know, they got their little goggles on and everything, and it's just a mess. And he's like, well, it looks like we're going to have to get out. And the passenger's like, what? We're going to have to bail out. We're going to have to get out. Okay. So the pit glides at like 105 knots or something. I mean, it's not slow. I think you cross the fence around 120, something like that when you're coming in. And the guy was actually he'd unstrapped and had actually gotten out of his seat, and then the guy who was the glider pilot, not the passenger, said, "Hey, sit back down. I think we found a place to land." And this guy, he was an 18-year-old CFIG. He's much older now. He was like 25 or 30 when this happened, but he dead stick the pit special onto this gravel road in the middle of nowhere. And then they landed, no damage, like you said, to the aircraft. And then the deputy sheriff came along about 30 minutes later and says, "Hey, are you guys missing something?" And then he opened the back door and they had the bent propeller in the back. It fallen to the ground in the field somewhere. So it's another good example of, you have your glider skills. The other for Air Force flying, formation, being on the end of a rope and knowing what to do to stay behind the tow plane. That's great for formation flying and other types. And of course, aerobatics, great. We used to call it acrobatics, but I think that's for people who are on the ground, actually acrobats. But then that was great for Air Force pilot training and learning how to fly. I mean, first formation flight, the guy's like, "You've done this before, haven't you?" "Yeah, okay." And then later on, I had to dead stick an F-16 in one time. So, but you're even guys who aren't glider pilots, they're trained so much in the F-16 on how to dead stick it and get it back home that I wouldn't say it's a glider skill specifically, but it's certainly it's not a very good glider in the F-16, so it probably doesn't translate that well.
Well, tell us about that one. That you got my interest. I'm sure you've got the interest of the others.
I don't know. We might be since you said this is a pilot form, we might be devolving into this the barroom discussion where it's only 10% true, that you're telling everything. Or maybe,
that's
so
okay. These stories can be embellished over the years.
Wait, I have to put on my "it's 5 o'clock somewhere" hat. Let's see. And then I do have a I did get out an adult beverage. So now, it's all going to be BS from this point on.
Okay. Well, an F-16 is a glider when you're dead sticking, right? It's just not a very good glider. So I want to know how you got into that situation and how you got out. You're here to tell about it.
I was actually I was an instructor in the F-16, and we had a nice, look at the line. And this was at Luke Air Force Base, and we it was a student sortie. So the student is in his own F-16 and I'm in my own F-16. And we were doing it's called a systems check, where you pull in behind the other aircraft and you check out your radar and see how the radar works and whether you can lock on with a simulated missile attack or whatever. And when I did that roll to come back, I had a big compressor stall on my engine, and there basically the one of the vanes got where it wasn't able to adjust properly. So whenever you push the power up, it would have a compressor stall, and it would basically the engine would roll back RPM. So then I'm like, well, I got enough room to glide back to the field from here. So why even continue to mess with it? And sure as, I turn back to the field, I'm going back to glide. I'm about 25,000 feet at this point. And then, you push the motor up and it wouldn't accelerate. So I'm basically have an engine running at idle. And it's producing some thrust. If I try to push it up, it starts coughing and spitting again. So it's not really a functional engine at this point, but you leave it running for redundant hydraulics and environmentals. Then if the engine quit all the way, you have what's called a EPU, which is an emergency power unit. And the emergency power unit is run by rocket fuel. It's a hydrazine fuel mix, and it runs at very high altitudes, doesn't need a whole lot of oxygen, and it runs your emergency generator and your hydraulics as well too, if you need it. But I'd come back in, and the weather was kind of bad, which is unusual for Phoenix, but I had to shoot an ILS engine out, and that involves going down that glide slope at 3 degrees, and it required about 310 knots of airspeed just to kind of maintain that glide slope. And then once I broke out below the clouds, it was about 1,000-foot ceiling, and that's when I had to do some S-turn energy depletion maneuvers, throw the gear down and set it down the runway, and then I stopped at the end, and I got a little bit of gas, a little bit of power just to taxi off, and that was about it. Not much to it, really.
I think there's quite a bit to it, but you did well.
It was
yeah.
another day in paradise, right?
Well, you did well for your own safety and the aircraft safety and the taxpayer's asset, right?
Well, in Phoenix, you don't want to bail out because you have all the houses there.
Okay.
Yeah,
among other reasons.
Up around there. Yeah, it's really built up around there. You have to be careful coming back in, or you just point it towards the mountains and eject and give it back to the taxpayers.
So I've got a million questions for you, but I'm going to finish with one more if we have time, Mark.
Yeah, we got one here from one of our guests that's on, Carrie Perkins.
Okay, so last question I'm going to ask is about combining ridge soaring. Well, our club wants to get into aerobatics. Basically, we have Jeff Pinnock is a very experienced 747 pilot, 787. I think he recently retrained for 787, and he's one of our club CFIGs that's interested in setting us up. There's a Victor Airway passing right near our field, so it's not a good place to do it right at our airfield. But there's a few miles south, there's a neighborhood where we could put in a box and do that. And it's not terribly far from our ridge where we get reliable ridge lift. So I've been fascinating about this notion that you could exploit that ridge lift between 2,500 and 3,500 feet that's pretty reliable, and take people for rides or do your training in that altitude band. But I've never heard it done. The stories I'm hearing are that it's you either ridge soar or you either do thermaling and cross country, or you do aerobatics, and not both. So if you could comment on that.
I think it depends on your glider and your mentality. I mean, I used to go fly cross country in a Salto, and it's a great aerobatic glider. So on the way back, that's how you killed all your altitude at the end of the flight, was just do acro on the way down and kill your energy. But the ASK-21 is great for that. Same with the DG-1000. It's a pretty capable aerobatic glider, and I can see that work out pretty well on the ridge, just doing it over and over again. The question would be, how how much acro can you do on one flight? Because you have pretty much unlimited energy to go do it. But the acro, it's a lot of fun. I think ASK-21 is a great platform for that. If you guys have that so equipped, it's got the little shorter wingspan than DG-1000, and it's a great. That's how I learned how to fly acro in the ASK-21.
Well, that's one of the reasons I got excited about it. The ASK-21, getting it last year. I'm trying to get trained on it. I've only ever done aerobatics in a Citabria. But I think it would be a nice evolution for our club to take advantage of that reliable ridge lift, put in a box that's within striking distance of it, and do an aerobatic maneuver or two, and then get your altitude back on the ridge.
Well, the other thing that I like about what you're saying is that, and this goes into that 500K that Mark was talking about, is that, and I don't want to be discriminating against older gliders or older aircraft, because I mean, I love flying a Citabria or a Maul or whatever, but to capture the imagination of younger pilots or pilots who are getting into it, having newer equipment like an ASK-21, it's a godsend, because it's new, it's sexy, it's something that people want to get in and fly. And I think that is a harbinger of increased growth at a club when new equipment is coming online, and you're doing your best to take care of it. So, and then if you throw in acro, I mean, folks would be enamored with that, and they would be studying even more to say, hey, how can I get in? Because that was the thing when we were at the Air Force Academy, is that we were all instructors, but we had this new fleet of ASK-21s, and they've since evolved to DG-1000s and et cetera. But we've got this new fleet of ASK-21s, and who wants to go learn how to fly acro? And everyone's, I want to go do that. So it's something that's really encouraging for young people to do. And I mean, and then maybe you can advance to thermaling upside down. It's a little different. It gets tiring after a while, though.
I like it. Thank you again, Phil.
We got a question here from Carrie Perkins. What is the longest flight you have ever flown? And let's take that from glider. Whatever longest glider flight you've ever flown.
Longest glider flight. Okay, yeah. I'd say 9.2 in a Nimbus 2, and I flew 950K in Nevada. That was my longest one. But that was a long time ago. I think that was when I was 23 years old. That was a long time ago now, because now I'm 53.
You must have had a really sore butt.
Yeah, and I didn't even make it back home. I landed out at another airfield, and I had to get this guy that was the 18-year-old CFIG. He gave me a tow back as the sun was going down.
Wow. And then Ian, which I love this question, Ian. I wanted to ask along this too. He said, you mentioned your ideal club. What does that club look like? What improvements could be made to our club?
Gosh, I don't know anything about your club. So, and I hope to get down there, and I'll bring the mini lac, and I want to do some ridge soaring with Mark, so we can have some fun going up the slopes there. If you asked me, because I have flown in Germany, and I've flown in the United States in clubs, and I've flown down under, and I've been in a few different places where they have gliders. And what's glaring for me at most glider clubs is that they're undercapitalized. So that leads to a dearth of high performance equipment. And it's difficult to, especially like where I'm flying here in Arlington, up in Seattle area. I mean, if you don't have a 40-to-1 glider, you start going over the Cascades and run into a little bit of sink, and you're going to have a hard time making it back to the field. So that 40-to-1 glider, it's not that it's a big crutch, it's just that it's a much more practical way of learning to fly cross country. And anyone that has a glider and flies cross country, I mean, they are a glutton for punishment if they get a glider that has less than 40-to-1. Now I'm going to say the ASK 21 counts, since you guys have one. I'm going to call it, that's 40-to-1. It's good enough. But so if you don't have that high performance ship, you're kind of hurting yourself, because I mean, I can go fly cross country in a 126. I just got to have my trailer ready, because it's the time is coming. I'm going to need it. If I had a club that was more modern and more ideal, I would want it to, number one, be a place where guys and gals can hang out. So I need a hangar. I need somewhere to keep dry and warm. And then what would be ideal would be to have one type of glider that the fleet can use, and they can do primary training, and they can also do advanced training in it. And ASK 21 is great for that. Another couple of gliders that I think are outstanding for that would be the DG 1000 and the Duo Discus. DG 1000, the glider club I was in Germany, they used DG 1000 for initial solos. Okay, so the paradigm shift that American glider pilots have to have is away from this. I grew up flying 233s or the Blanick and the glass ship. Whoa, that's really advanced for me, and I've got to really be careful flying that. And if you go into a modern trainer like a DG 1000, I mean, they do initial solo work in that. And that I watched a 14-year-old girl do her first solo, and she flew for 5 hours in a DG 1000. So it's a great basic trainer, and it can be used as an advanced trainer too, with its good legs and good L over D. If I had my choice, I'd have a Duo Discus, because I think they're a little smoother ship and it's a little bit more responsive. But DG 1000 is great, and I would take 500 grand if we had 500 grand, and I would take a portion of that, and I'd make it as a down payment on a hangar, and I'd build me a hangar that I could afford or make payments on, and something that's got room for all my gliders and keeps me warm, because I don't need to be assembling and disassembling gliders. The attention span of today's youth is not such that they can come by and spend all day long at a glider port waxing down gliders or putting gliders together or taking them apart and putting them away every day. They need to have the things assembled. It's a more efficient operation, and it's actually safer in a lot of ways, just having the ships assembled all the time. Then I would have I'd spend 300 or 400 grand, and I'd find me 2 or 3 Duo Disci, and I'd have them as my club ships, and I'd give basic and cross country and advanced instruction on all those ships, and that maybe have the ASK 21 for acro, and then I would have a couple of Condors simulators in the corner, and I'd have maybe a small bar where adult beverages might be served, and then after flying's done, someone could maybe have a beer, beer from the keg or something like that. But I need a place where kids can come and play. I don't care if they play Xbox or Nintendo, or they play Condor, or while they're waiting for a glider flight, they do something that's enjoyable for them, and then they go fly. And moms need to be comfortable dropping these kids off, and hopefully we get them in their teens. But if not, we get them in their when they're 45, like Corey started, and now he's flying a tail dragger in the backcountry with a part owner in a mall or whatever. So that's really cool stuff. And that's also another thing too that needs to be cultivated to bring new tow pilots into the profession. And that's where we're going to be. I'm sucking wind up here getting new tow pilots in the Seattle Glider Council. So it's an issue.
Appreciate that. We, after Ron and Tim O'Donnell and I visited the dust up there to when we met you. I mean, that flight with you changed that, you know, you always have these moments in your life that kind of focus you or change you or inspire you. And that flight with you, that was my, you know, that I knew from that moment a lot of things that I was going to go do. And one of them was, you know, you and Kevin was like, you guys, you got to get an ASK 21. And we got an ASK 21. I bought my own plane. I've been doing cross country. And, you know, like my next thing is like, you know, I would have competed in a contest this year had we didn't have this little virus go around. And, but hopefully next year that'll happen. And,
I do want to mention something for the contest thing that some folks think it may be a little bit harder than normal flying, but the reality is that the way I got away from the field the first time is I saw this other gaggle of guys taking off, and I just followed them. And when you're on a contest course, there's a guy thermaling here, there's 3 or 4 thermaling over here, and they're marking all the thermals for you. And your ability to go out and just take a little bit from this thermal, a little bit from that thermal, and just kind of make your way around the course. And all of a sudden you think, well, this is not too bad. I can do this. So you have those markers, and you're flying over a course where people know there's landable terrain, and it's an enjoyable time. And plus you have all the resources. And that's the thing that, it could be the United States with COVID, or it could be the Seattle Glider Council with tow planes, or your club with tow planes and gliders. We have a lot of resources in this country, and if we just marshal them the right way, we can have a lot of fun going out there flying, no doubt.
Yeah, our next goal, I think, is to secure a second tow plane. So if you have ideas of what you would do as a club for fundraising, and then also, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, keep going.
Well, we actually haven't made this totally official with the club yet, but somebody is donating us a PIC 20D. So we're going to get our first high performance solo airplane within the week here. Something that's, that 40-to-1 or greater. And I'm very interested in this idea of taking guys to like a grass field somewhere and going off field landings.
Yeah, it becomes an all-day event, but you launch them and then they come in, and we've done that here in Arlington with Green Valley, which is just south of Arlington Field. But it's really more of a crop duster field. I mean, it's a real airport. It's just a grass strip. But to actually have permission to go on someone's property and really do it in the dirt like you would on an off-field landing, I think it's a challenge, because you're going to go up there and you're not going to see any of the landmarks from the air until you're up there, and you have to fly to that field and go land at it. And there's a couple of other good techniques too that you can do with when I get low, and gosh, I've landed out more times than I care to admit, and part of that's due to flying a contest and trying to fly records. You're going to end up landing out. And this actually happened with me and Kevin Finke one time. It was on the ridge there at Wenatchee. And we were flying cross country, and we got low, and we're flying together, and he had his ASW 24 hours on DG 1000, and we're stuck on that ridge. And we can't get more than 500 feet above that ridge, and we're just there. And you're not going to make it back to a freighter very well, because we weren't willing just to press towards a freighter with what we had. There was no way we would make it. We could just land at Wenatchee, so why not just hang out for a while? And then we got low, and we started going to certain fields. And then, once you're going to get to a field below 1,000 feet, just started going to all 4 corners of the field and seeing where the differences in the terrain or the wheat to the dirt, the heating differences might be, and look for thermals on that part of it. And we couldn't find anything, so then we had to dive back to the ridge and then work our way back up again. We did that over and over again, probably 45 minutes or an hour. eventually we got some lift, and I was able to climb out of there, and the conditions actually improved quite a bit. And I flew west across the Columbia for a little while, and then came back to Ephrata. And Kevin just he got to like 4,000 feet or something like that, and he just says, "Forget it, I'm going back to Ephrata." He just bumped his way on the little dust devils on the plateau, getting back to Ephrata. But finding a way to practice the off-field landing, yeah, that's huge. It's a supreme confidence builder. Oh, but tow planes.
Tow planes.
So,
Raising money.
yeah, well, I'll tell you my proposal, and it can't necessarily apply to any other clubs. And just as a caveat, when I propose this to members of the SGC who could be listening right now, hello, SGC board members, hi. Not only was it not well received, but some of the key members of the, and I wasn't at the meetings when it was proposed, but some of the key members, the ones that put the kibosh and everything, they wouldn't even answer my text or reply to an email about this idea. And they thought it was going to actually be the beginning of the end of our operations. And like, they didn't see anything until COVID hit, I guess. But I mean, you want to talk about the beginning of the end of operations. It usually happens when you get your last young new member. And for the SGC, I am probably one of the youngest and most recent members. And I've been there for 8 years. So when you're not getting new members, your organization is slowly dying off. And we need tow pilots because we have people who own gliders. Matter of fact, I believe the membership hovers between 70 or 100 people at the SGC. Let's just say it's 100 on a great day, okay? And that's for people who have to buy a membership because they're gonna go to Dust Up or something like that. And we do not have qualified tailwheel pilots. And we have a Cessna 182 that we can tow with. And I've towed behind the 182, and I'm also a 182 tow pilot. And it tows a DG 1000 fine. It's not the greatest tow in the world, but it's fine. It's comparable to the Pawnee. It has decent horsepower, but it's not sexy. And there are a few people that are going to come to Ephrata to do 2 or 3 tows in a 182 and call it wrap. It's not exciting to them. Now, if they were going to get a tailwheel checkout and fly the Pawnee, they may come over and fly for a little bit. It's a little bit more sexy and more interesting to them. So we need people who find towing sexy, and we need tailwheel pilots. And I had a proposal to help do that. And one of those proposals involved doing an assessment on 100 members. Well, you and I talked about this before, Mark. If I got 100 members and I can assess them all $700, there's $70,000 right there. So that goes a long ways towards getting a tow plane. Then you could come up with different assessment methods that involve, after a period of years, you can get some of your money back or whatever. But I would gladly loan the SGC $700 to guarantee that I have a tow plane pilot all season long, with the possibility of getting that $700 back somehow. Maybe I get the $700 back by bringing in a new member, and then the new member has to cough up the $700 so that he can continue to get tows, and then I leave and I get my $700 back. Or maybe I'm getting too old to fly and I retire, and there's a way I can get it back then. But there are a lot of ways to finance that thing. The assessment is super easy, but you can only go to the assessment well so many times, then people don't want to deal with it anymore. But right now we have a lot of members paying. We don't have any tow planes towing. So our organization is going to be in dire straits.
Thank you. Something when
Hey,
I
Mark,
started.
can I ask a follow-up question?
Yes, you may, Ron.
So generalizing then, Phil, why was there such a non-acceptance of this idea? What was you said something about it was the beginning of the end or something. Why did they not like this idea?
My gut feeling is that if based on insurance and or tow plane trends, if there were a way for the SGC to not have to use tail draggers to tow with, I think that they would favor that because of the insurance and other liabilities. But when you go into grass strips or you go into fields that are not so improved, you know, having a nose, you know, conventional gear is the best. And if you have the nose wheel, you're asking for some troubles. Now, if you've got just pavement that you're towing off of all the time, then the 182, you can do all right with that. But I think there's also a false belief that there are other tow pilots out there who are ready to tow. And we have a lot of elderly tow pilots that are losing their medical. We got tow pilots that are over 80 years old, and we have tow pilots that are flying crop dusters or whatever. But they may be moving on. They may be going on to commercial pilot land. They may be doing something else, and they're not going to necessarily come to Ephrata to tow 2 or 3 times in a day, and then that's their entire day. If you're trying to build time, that's not how you do it. So we don't have, the well is almost dry when it comes to crafting new tow pilots that have tail wheel experience. So I think we need to do it organically inside of our club, and we could do it with an auxiliary club that only involves flying tail wheel aircraft. And it was funny that, you know, Corey is talking about how he wants to fly tail wheels, and Mark J is saying, hey, I'm flying tail wheel aircraft right now. We have a lot of members that would like to fly tail wheel aircraft, and they are not private pilot airplanes. But to get tail wheel instruction is like finding hen's teeth, and being able to fly one by yourself is very difficult insurance wise. So there's plenty of guys that will be able to find a tail wheel and get their 10 hours and then be cleared to solo, but they can't fly that airplane that they were just getting trained in because there's no insurance requirements that'll cover them. So if we had a tail wheel aircraft in our club, we could train pilots organically to be tow pilots. On days when the weather is not so great, they can go up and do acro, and they have the ability to eventually become a tail wheel tow pilot for us. And that's what we need over the long term.
Cool. So just to kind of follow up, and I think I probably know the answer, but would you see, because we have a pretty good active youth program, how would you see us working that tail wheel into that youth program? Would you just some thoughts around that, so that not only do we end up with glider pilots, but some of these younger guys can get some tail wheel time and learn to tow and that kind of stuff?
For me, I'm at my club, I'm trying to incorporate it with this dreaded 2.5 to 2.9 hour drive from Seattle to get to Ephrata. It's difficult to get participation to go over there and have one tow. And if I had the tow plane and I had it on the west side, I could fly to Ephrata and tow, and I could come back home that night versus burning another overnight or 6 hours on the road in a car. Okay, so that could be beneficial. If I had the ability to use the tow plane the day prior and the day after the day that I towed, I would sign up to tow because I love flying the tail dragger, and I would just go fly over there, maybe take my wife for a $100 hamburger, and then I would set myself up to tow that day, and then I would come back. But that's me wanting to fly a tail dragger across the Cascades. Not everybody wants to do that. But in a local club where you have it, I want, like we talked about at the beginning, most flying careers go in fits and starts. And the more I can get someone flying all the time, the more likely I am to keep them on the property. And it could be a combination glider and powered aircraft club. And that's probably what we need to do at the SGC to build tow pilots. But if you want more participation, I mean, I don't know of many clubs that you can go rent a tail dragger or be a club member and fly a tail dragger. I mean, those are really rare. So if you had something, you would be like the ASK 21 flying on the ridge with acro. You'd have something sexy. Not many other clubs have that. And if you have an instructor that knows how, we've also had trouble with our SGC, including some of our board members that have actually been in the tail dragger when they had a crack up. So they had a ground loop and they damaged the tow plane. Well, that doesn't look good when your instructors have that problem. And it can happen to lots of instructors, and it could happen to me if it, I don't want it to happen, but a tail dragger has a propensity to have more damage than other aircraft. And you just have to plan that into your operating budget and your insurance rates. It's going to get banged up. It's a tail dragger. Hopefully it doesn't. And if it's one pilot's aircraft and it's his baby, it may never get banged up. But if it's going to be a club ship, it cannot be a Citabria or a Piper Cub that's made of gold, because it's going to get damaged and it's going to require repair.
Interesting
So
answer.
we,
Thanks.
Bill, I think you need a Maul M4 220 for your club.
You are correct, sir.
For training and for getting over the hill and for
Yes.
for towing tailwheel out in the Freda.
And Phil, we did actually float this idea, a similar one, where this club would evolve a little bit into a normal flying club, in that there might be the idea of a tail dragger in the fleet that actually would be available to members, but something that would also be able to tow itself.
Yes, and
and
having that
based on your-
backup tow plane.
Yeah, I was curious on your thoughts on that as far as utility and just usefulness.
Yeah, no doubt having a tail dragger that has the capability of backup tow. I wouldn't want to use this as a primary one, because I really want it to be that carrot out there for young pilots, or it could be old pilots that have never had a tail dragger rating, to go out there and build their flight time in the tail dragger. And my proposal for the SGC, it was to only have the pilots pay for gas and oil, whatever it took, gas and oil. And then the umbrella of the insurance and the maintenance schedule was taken care of by the SGC. So encourage lots of flying out there, plus also have 2 pilots flying that are both learning how to get their 100 hours in tail dragger. So they're both building time at the same time, both from the front seat and the back seat, or in the Maul would be, side by side, or that. But the Maul would be particularly useful. I mean, with a 4-seater, that's fantastic.
We have to figure out how to get around the insurance hurdle to make it useful as a backup tow plane. Right, we've struggled with that a little bit.
Even if
Ron,
I just had it for just flying to and from the airport, because my vision right now, because I have to work around my current restrictions at the SGC, the vision is to get a Citabria or whatever, and then someone can fly it. They can either fly it once they get over to a Freda, or they can fly it after because anyone pretty much can tow in a 182. If you have, a little bit more than private pilot skills, you can tow in a 182. And we check guys out to do that, but they wouldn't be able to tow in our Pawnee. But after they tow in the 182 and everyone's out flying around, go get in the Citabria and go fly up to one of these grass strips and land and take off and go do some acro. I mean, if I'm over there, it doesn't suck to get free acrobatic instruction from an F-22 pilot in Citabria when you just got some downtime. So there's a lot of little advantages that you could have to this aircraft. And the only thing we got to do is keep the ADs going and the maintenance, and let these other guys pay the fuel. And this is a tasty little carrot for guys to show up at the club, because like I said before, I want this club where people will show up when they don't have much else going on, and they're not going to be out there pushing gliders around all day. Maybe they just show up. Hey, I'm a club member. Is this a Citabria being flown right now? Nope, it's not. I'm going to sign up and go fly. Never, if that's a Citabria can tow, maybe someone shows up with a glider and goes, man, these clouds are popping a lot better than I thought. Can you just give me a tow? And he's like, sure, I'll give you a tow. So having that backup tow capability is huge.
Ron and I kicked around this very similar idea, except it was, and the way it came about was we thought, like a Super Cub or, but the thing about a Super Cub, right? I could buy a Pawnee and a Champ for less than a Super Cub. And so we thought we need to start a little tow pilot club that the Champ, it will never actually tow, and but it would just be used to train tow pilots and let guys just take and build time, just like you're saying. You know,
I would love that. And the other thing too is that, like we talked about with a Champ or a Satabria, I like Satabria better because I can throw an extra carrot in there as far as a little bit more. I mean, a Satabria 150 GCBC, that's a pretty good all-around aircraft. I mean, it does a lot of things, especially with the climb prop and things like that. But having a little extra carrot, a little extra power, and throwing in doing some acro from time to time, that would I would just want to build that cadre of tow pilots, because I mean, I'm seeing a lot of guys retiring and they're just not coming back.
anybody have some last questions, thoughts, concerns, ideas, jokes?
Well, I'm really appreciate you joining us, Phil. And I was just curious if you had any visuals or any sexy photos from some of your experiences to share with us.
Gosh, I don't even know how to share the screen here. You might have to give me a second. This is the second time I've been on Zoom, but I really appreciate you guys.
I did give you you're the host, so you're in control.
It's like, this is the guy's second time on Zoom. He must not get out very much.
Or maybe you do.
Maybe I'm doing too much IRL with the in real life thing. Let's see if I got some. I don't even know if I can do this. Can you even share a video? Is that possible?
Zoom might do that. Some of the others don't have the bandwidth, but Zoom might.
Let's see if I got something here that's any good.
Yeah, Zoom, you can share a video in Zoom.
Okay, let's see if I'm trying to get something that's got decent shots here. I think my problem is I don't have very many of my photos uploaded here, but I'll show one just on a. It was kind of a. It was a very bittersweet day. It was a day that one of my friends died in a glider incident there in Ely, and he died soaring on the ridge line. And this day was a strange day. It was filled. It looked like in the beginning it was going to be some wave clouds, and then it got really windy, like 25, 30 knots of wind. And then it turned into a popping cumulus type day, and the weather had I would say rotor enhanced thermals. So the rotor enhanced thermals were popping in different places. And let's see if I got one. I don't even know if you can see this. It says share screen. It says show desktop. Maybe I can, maybe, let's see that. Let's see if this will pop up. Can you guys see that?
Can. I see your LK there.
Let's see if I can zoom in a little bit. So that day was that was the day that my friend died, but it was actually kind of a bittersweet day on the fact that I went and I tried my first 100-kilometer speed triangle, and I've never flown a 100-kilometer triangle. To me, it's kind of a short distance, but you would think that it just requires one thermal or two, and you just kind of zip around there and you're done, right? and you get to lose 1,000 meters from start to finish, but it's kind of an interesting way that you calculate how you're going to lose those meters. And this is actually a picture of me getting ready to take off for my second flight. Because my first flight, I went and did a 100 kilometer triangle, and I got hung up at the finish line, and I wasn't able to quite finish at above the finish height. So I had to thermal back up to even cross the finish height, and it really killed my time. It was good enough for a national record, but wasn't good enough for a world record. But I saw a better area that was about 20 miles away, probably about 35 miles away actually, but I got a 20-mile tow south into another area. So I landed and I redeclared another triangle in an area that I thought was better. And I went over to that area and flew it. Turns out when I got there, it was overdeveloped quite a bit. And it turned into like dodging hail and dodging rain showers, then finally starting out on the course and ending up at about 100 feet AGL crossing the finish line. And I actually was able to, I got lucky and set the 100-kilometer speed triangle world record on that flight. So I felt like I made some, I got better on the second flight anyway.
How did you decide you wanted to do this?
I went down there last year and I saw some of those guys setting records, and I said, well, you know, this maybe these records didn't, I mean, some of these records were not a very big hurdle to get over, but some of the records were actually held by the world gliding champions. So I said, well, you know, if I can put my name on the books of those guys, it might be kind of fun. But you have to have a lot of money to set these records, because you have to pay the fees for the National Aeronautics Association and the Fédération Aéronautique Internationale. So soaring is not cheap. And that's I think one misnomer that a lot of people put into it, that because it doesn't have an engine and you're not flying for the the powered aircraft, that it's cheaper. But soaring can be expensive. So there's some things to it that I think that if we band our resources together, and that's what I talk about with guys putting their money together to buy a glider. And if you have questions on how to finance a $27,000 discus, it's pretty simple math. Get two other guys and spend $9,000, and you have your own discus. And there's going to be a lot of people who can help you get that discus ready to fly. And then you're going to be needing tows, and then you're going to be supporting your local club organization. So one other thing I want to throw out there is all the safety considerations, and then all the things that your instructors train you on, the Soaring Safety Foundation, and the speeds to fly and the patterns, so that you don't crash your JS1 on short final like one of our national team members did. ADS-B in and out, having mode C, power flarm, practicing gaggling skills so you're comfortable flying with other gliders, and then carrying the, what is it here? Let's see if I can stop screen share. Then, you have the in-reach if you can, in case you land out or you get stuck in a ditch somewhere. I carry a little survival vest with all the bells and whistles and signal mirrors and things like that, and a spare VHF radio, so that when I get a chance to, if I land out, I can at least contact somebody, especially if I'm injured.
All right. Anyone else?